When Clint Eastwood sat in her section, Mia had no idea her life was about to change. Adjusting her apron, she glanced at the clock above the diner's counter. It was nearing 7 p.m., the time when the dinner rush usually subsided, allowing her to ease into the final hours of her shift. For most people, the small diner tucked off the highway was just a quick stop, a place to grab a bite before continuing their journey. For Mia, it was much more than that. At 28, she juggled long hours at the diner with raising her 6-year-old son, Jordan. Every tip and paycheck went toward keeping their modest apartment and covering Jordan's ever-growing school expenses. She moved between tables with practiced ease, her warm smile hiding the fatigue that gnawed at her. The regulars knew bits and pieces of her story. Some would quietly leave an extra dollar or two when they could, but Mia never sought pity. Life had taught her early on that fairness was a luxury, and the only way forward was to keep pushing ahead. The bell above the door jingled, breaking her focus. Expecting another weary traveler, Mia glanced up. Instead, a man grabbing her notepad and pen, Mia took a steadying breath before heading to his table. As she approached, the details became clearer. His steady, slightly weathered hands resting on the table, and his piercing eyes under the brim of his hat, which seemed to notice everything without revealing much in return. He looked up as she arrived at his booth, his expression calm and composed. "Good evening," she began, her voice steadier than she'd expected. "What can I get for you?" He glanced briefly at the menu before pushing it aside. "Just a coffee and a burger. Medium rare. No onions," he said simply. Straightforward enough. Mia jotted it down, but as she turned to walk away, she couldn't ignore the faint tremble in her hand. Before she could leave, Clint's voice caught her. "Busy night?" he asked, his tone casual. Turning back, she was surprised. Most customers didn't bother with small talk unless they were regulars. "Not too bad," she replied with a faint smile. "Keeps me on my toes." He nodded, his expression softening ever so slightly. "You've got a good rhythm. Not an easy thing to keep in a place like this." For a moment, she blinked, unsure how to respond. Was Clint Eastwood, the Clint Eastwood, complimenting her work ethic? Managing a polite smile, she returned to the counter to place his order, but her mind buzzed with questions. Why was he here, in this tiny diner on the highway? He could easily dine at the fanciest restaurants in California. Yet here he was, drinking water from a chipped glass and waiting for a simple burger like any other traveler. When his order was ready, Mia carefully carried the plate and coffee to his table. She set them down with precision, noticing a brief look of gratitude from him. "Thank you," he said simply. "You're welcome," she replied, trying to sound composed, though she couldn't help but feel this interaction was somehow significant. As she moved to serve other customers, she noticed he wasn't in a hurry to eat. Instead, he seemed lost in thought, sipping his coffee occasionally. Something about his presence stuck with her, as if this wasn't just an ordinary visit. Mia couldn't shake the feeling that this night was going to be anything but typical. Mia busied herself refilling coffee cups, clearing tables, and taking new orders, but her eyes kept drifting toward Clint's booth. He ate slowly, almost deliberately, as though time was of no concern. Every so often, their eyes would meet, and he'd give her a polite nod, a subtle gesture of acknowledgement that sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach. When he finished his meal, Clint raised his hand slightly to catch her attention. Wiping her hands on her apron, Mia approached, keeping her expression neutral. "Everything all right?" she asked, her voice calm. "Perfect," he replied with a small smile. "That was one of the best burgers I've had in a long time." She let out a soft laugh, the compliment catching her off guard. "Well, I'll let the cook know. He'll be happy to hear that." For a moment, Clint didn't say anything. He simply looked at her, and in the silence, it felt as though he was studying her. Not in a critical way, but with a kind of thoughtful curiosity that left her feeling both exposed and unexpectedly seen. "You've got a good energy about you," he said finally. "You remind me of someone I knew a long time ago." Mia blinked, unsure how to respond. Was that a compliment? A memory? She couldn't tell. "Well, thank you," she managed, her cheeks warming. "I just try to get through the day like everyone else." He nodded, his eyes glinting with something she couldn't quite interpret. "That's the trick, isn't it? Just getting through." Before she could reply, Clint reached into his pocket and pulled out a few bills. He placed them on the table, along with a folded piece of paper. "Keep the change," he said, rising from his seat. "And read this when you have a moment." Mia stared at the note, her heart pounding. "Thank you," she said softly, though she wasn't sure if he heard her. The bell above the door chimed as Clint left, and just like that, he was gone. For a moment, Mia stood frozen by the booth, her eyes fixed on the note as if it might burn her fingers. What could he possibly have written? And why was he so insistent that she read it? But there was no time for answers now. There were still tables to serve, and Mia wasn't one to leave her duties unfinished, no matter how much her mind raced with curiosity. As the evening wound down and the diner quieted, Mia cleared Clint's booth. Most of the remaining customers were nursing their coffees or chatting softly, the gentle hum of the jukebox filling the space. She picked up the folded note with trembling fingers, slipping it into her apron pocket as she cleaned the table. Anxiety prickled at her, though she couldn't explain why. It was just a note, wasn't it? When her shift ended, Mia retreated to the back room to gather her belongings. Her curiosity finally overwhelmed her, and she pulled out the folded papers, carefully unfolding it. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, and her breath caught. "Dear Mia, I don't know much about you, but in the short time I've been here, I've seen something rare. True resilience. Watching how you manage this place with grace, even under pressure, is a reminder of how much strength exists in the everyday heroes of this world. You remind me of someone very dear to me, someone who taught me the value of hard work and kindness. I don't know your story, but I can see in your eyes that you've carried more than your share of burdens. That's why I want to do something. No strings attached." Mia's hands trembled as she read on. "I'm leaving a small gesture for you to use however you see fit, whether it's for your child, your future, or simply a moment of rest. I hope it brings you some peace. People like you deserve to be seen, and I see you." Folded inside the note was a check. When Mia saw the amount, her heart nearly stopped. $10,000. Her knees gave way, and she sank onto the bench in the back room, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't just the money, although that alone was life-changing. It wasn't just the check, or even the generous amount that left Mia stunned. It was the words, the acknowledgement that someone as accomplished as Clint Eastwood had taken the time to notice her, to care about someone who often felt invisible in the world. It was almost too much to process. One question kept surfacing in her mind. Why her? And just as pressing, what was she supposed to do with this unexpected gift? Mia sat in the diner's back room, feeling as though time had stopped. The check in her hands felt unreal, like something out of a dream. She thought of the stack of overdue bills cluttering her kitchen counter, the second-hand sneakers her son Jordan had been wearing for far too long, and the leaky faucet in their cramped apartment that she'd been unable to fix. This money could change all of that. But beyond the financial relief, Clint's words echoed in her mind. You remind me of someone very dear to me. Who was that person? And what had made Clint Eastwood, a man she'd only ever known through a screen, see something in her? It wasn't just about the money or the note. It was the way he'd looked at her, as though he recognized her struggle and respected her for it. Something she hadn't felt in years. Mia wiped away her tears and steadied herself with a deep breath. She couldn't keep this to herself, so she called Tasha, her best friend, and unwavering support through so many tough times. Within minutes, Tasha arrived at the diner, sliding into one of the empty booths across from Mia. Wait, Tasha said, holding up her hands as Mia passed her the note. You're telling me Clint Eastwood left you this? Mia nodded, her eyes still red and puffy from crying. I don't even know why, she admitted. I didn't do anything special. Tasha read the note in silence, her eyes widening as she took in each word. When she finally saw the check, her jaw dropped and she let out a low whistle. Girl, this is unreal. Do you know what this could mean for you and Jordan? I know, Mia whispered, her voice trembling. But it doesn't feel real. Why would someone like him care about someone like me? Tasha reached across the table, taking Mia's hands in hers. Because he saw you, Mia. He saw what I've seen all along. You work harder than anyone I know, and no matter what life throws at you, you don't let it break you. People notice that kind of strength. Mia's gaze dropped to the check. Gratitude filled her heart, but so did a pang of doubt. What if I don't deserve this? She asked softly. What if it's all some kind of mistake? It's not a mistake, Tasha said firmly, her voice resolute. And yes, you do deserve it. The real question is, what are you going to do with it? And there it was. The question that had been haunting Mia since the moment she read the note. As much as she wanted to celebrate, she couldn't ignore the weight of what Clint had given her, or the responsibility it carried. Later that night, after Jordan was fast asleep, Mia sat alone at the kitchen table. The note and check lay in front of her, illuminated by the flickering light above. The apartment was quiet except for the occasional creak of the old pipes. Her mind buzzed with possibilities, each one pulling her in a different direction. This money could pay their overdue rent. It could replace the unreliable car she depended on. It could even open doors for Jordan, opportunities she'd only ever dreamed of giving him. But as exciting as the possibilities were, they also scared her. Mia picked up the note again, her eyes scanning Clint's words for what felt like the 100th time. I hope it brings you some peace. People like you deserve to be seen, and I see you. Those words struck a deeper chord than she'd expected. How many years had she spent in survival mode, working long shifts, skipping meals so Jordan could eat, pushing herself to exhaustion just to keep them afloat? Through it all, she'd felt invisible, as if the world didn't care whether she made it or not. But Clint Eastwood had seen her. He'd seen her strength, her determination, her resilience, and suddenly Mia realized this wasn't just about the money. It was about believing she was worthy of something better. Her thoughts turned to her father, the man who had been her greatest cheerleader before he passed. He used to tell her, "Don't let the world wear you down, kid. You've got a fire in you." For the first time in years, Mia felt that fire flicker again. She grabbed a notepad and began scribbling ideas, ways she could use this money to create lasting change for herself and Jordan. Maybe, just maybe, Mia could finally pursue the dream she'd tucked away for so long, a career in accounting. It had always been there, in the back of her mind, but time and resources had never allowed her to explore it. She thought about setting up a small college fund for Jordan, something to give him a brighter future. But one idea kept returning, louder and clearer than the rest, paying it forward. Clint's extraordinary gesture had changed her life, and she couldn't shake the thought of doing the same for someone else. Even with this clarity, the uncertainty lingered. The road ahead still seemed daunting. Yet, for the first time in a long time, Mia let herself feel something she hadn't in years: hope. The morning sunlight poured through the window as Mia stood in the kitchen, sipping her coffee and watching Jordan play on the worn carpet with his action figures. The check and note rested on the table, neatly folded now after a sleepless night of reflection. But Mia had made up her mind. Her first call was to Tasha, who immediately offered to watch Jordan for the afternoon. Mia explained she needed some time to figure things out, and Tasha, ever supportive, simply said, "You do what you need to do, girl. I've got you." With Jordan happily settled at Tasha's house, Mia headed to the bank. The check felt impossibly heavy in her purse, almost too surreal to believe it was real. When the bank teller, a young woman with a bright smile, saw the amount, her eyebrows raised slightly. "That's quite a deposit," the teller remarked, her tone polite but clearly curious. Mia nodded, managing a small smile. "It's a gift," she said, keeping it simple. The teller didn't ask further questions, and Mia exhaled a quiet sigh of relief as the check cleared. She walked out of the bank feeling a strange mix of emotions: relief, excitement, and an almost overwhelming sense of responsibility. This wasn't just money. It was a second chance. It was an opportunity to rewrite her story and give Jordan a future she could only dream of before. Her next stop was the local community college, a place she'd passed by countless times over the years. Each time, she'd wondered what it would feel like to sit in a classroom again, to learn, to grow. This time, she didn't just wonder. She parked the car and stepped inside, her hands trembling as she approached the admissions desk. A woman with a kind face greeted her warmly. "How can I help you?" the woman asked. Mia took a steadying breath. "I'd like to enroll," she said, her voice clear despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "In accounting." The woman's smile widened. "You're in the right place. Let's get you started." As Mia filled out the paperwork, a sense of purpose washed over her, something she hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about setting an example for Jordan, showing him that it was never too late to chase your dreams, no matter how impossible they might seem. But as Mia left the admissions office, another thought struck her. What if this was just the beginning? Clint's gesture felt like more than a gift. It felt like the spark, to ignite a much bigger fire. Weeks turned into months, and the changes in Mia's life were nothing short of transformative. Mia juggled her shifts at the diner with evening classes at the community college. It wasn't easy, but there was a newfound determination in her every step. Jordan noticed, too. He'd proudly tell his friends, "My mom's going to college." Every time Mia heard him say it, she couldn't help but smile. But Mia's goal wasn't just to change her own life. Inspired by Clint's incredible gesture, she set aside part of the money to create a small fund to help others in her community. Whether it was a struggling single parent in need of groceries or a student unable to afford their textbooks, Mia quietly stepped in to make a difference, carrying forward the message from Clint's note. One evening, as Mia sat at the kitchen table, flipping through her accounting textbook, Jordan tugged at her sleeve. "Mom," he asked, his big brown eyes full of curiosity, "do you think that man will ever come back to the diner?" The question caught Mia off guard. Would Clint Eastwood ever return? She had no idea. But even if he didn't, his impact on her life was something she would carry with her forever. "Maybe," she said softly, ruffling Jordan's hair. "But even if he doesn't, he'll always be part of our story." And that was the truth. Clint's kindness had reminded Mia of the power of compassion, of truly seeing someone, lifting them up when life felt heavy. His gesture had rekindled her belief in herself, in life's possibilities, and in the importance of paying it forward. That night, as Mia closed her textbook and got ready for bed, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. Her journey was far from over, but for the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was thriving, one small step at a time. The next time a stranger walked into her section at the diner, Mia greeted them with the same warmth and grace she always did. She understood now that even the smallest interactions had the power to change someone's life. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the potential to create ripples far beyond what we can see. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and share it with someone who could use a little inspiration today.